These are things that we can't skate over. We have to address them. And if we believe in liberal democracy and freedom, we need to bring this conversation out and have it in the open.
You're flirting with conspiracy here. Don't flirt with conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy.
I don't want you to do that.
They say it. Politics has become a belief system in place of religion. But when politics becomes your moral system, this is the nightmare you end up with. Europe spends money that it should be spending on its defense, paying people to sit at home and do nothing.
Right.
Because it counts on America picking up the tab for its defense. 150 years ago, the American Republic was saved by the North. It's the southern US that's now going to save America.
Islam is not compatible, your words, with the way of living of the West. What did you mean by that?
I know a lot of the people who run Britain, and they are singularly incompetent. They can't even control the country's borders. The American branch of Western culture is perhaps the pinnacle of human achievement that has created the greatest society on earth. The world owes a huge debt to America for keeping liberal democracy alive. Can you imagine what would happen in the United States if a political assassination happened to Donald Trump a few days before the election? It doesn't bear thinking about. You need to recognize there's only one way, Patrick, of dealing with this.
How's that?
You've got to give every family in America the choices that today only rich people have. And there's a very simple way of doing this.
Did you ever think you would make it? I feel I'm so close I could taste sweet victory. I know this life meant for me. Yeah, why would you bet on Goliath when we got Bet David? Valuetainment, giving values contagious. This world of entrepreneurs, we get no value to haters. How they run, homie, look what I become. I'm the one.
You know, it's not every day you meet somebody who grew up until teenager, I believe, in Uganda while his parents were fighting AIDS. And then from there, he moves to UK, becomes a member of the parliament from 05 to 17, co-founder of Voting to Leave, Brexit. Then out of all the places he can decide to move to, he chooses to move to Mississippi. There's plenty we got 50 states he could choose from. He could choose California. He could choose New York. He could choose Florida. He could choose Tennessee. He could even choose South Dakota. He chooses Mississippi of all the places. And he's got a lot of strong opinions. With that being said, Douglas Carswell, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Patrick, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, and the timing of it's kind of strange, right? With everything that's going on with the second assassination attempt in a span of 60 days we're talking about, right? So obviously we're going to talk about Brexit. We're going to talk about some of the comments you've made about the religion of Islam, Muslims, what's going on in UK, some of the ideas, philosophies that you have. We'll cover all that stuff. Poland. Is there the next Brexit? Who's going to be the next one leaving? Ukraine. You're a big supporter of, Ukraine and what they're doing there against Putin. But I want to start off first with this. Yesterday, it's a regular Sunday. Everybody's doing their things with their family. I'm coming back from a game. All of a sudden, everyone's texting me, Pat, did you see what just happened? Second assassination attempt on the president while he's golfing. Rob, if you can play this clip, and I'd like to get your reaction on it. Go ahead.
How was this able to happen? And for future reference, is there any upsecurity of a golf course?
Well, you got to understand the golf course is surrounded by shrubbery. So when somebody gets into the shrubbery, they're pretty much out of sight. All right. And at this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. Well, because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service
is that even possible?
deems possible. So I would imagine that the next time he comes to the golf course, there'll probably be a little bit more people around the perimeter.
So how does it make any sense for a man who was a former president, who has the followership like no other when he goes and speaks, yet the U.S. government doesn't think it's necessary to give full-time Secret Service to him so something like this doesn't happen?
They need to step up protection. I mean, this is the second time in 60 days. We don't know the full details. It could be that actually the Secret Service detail did such a great job they prevented this. But what we do know is that he came within an inch of being assassinated 60 days ago. It looks like, and we don't know the full details, but it looks like he came within a few hundred yards of something similar this time. He urgently needs full protection. Can you imagine what would happen in the United States if a political assassination happened to Donald Trump a few days before the election, it doesn't bear thinking about.
Yeah, but I mean, that part is fine. We've all answered those questions, right? Half an inch away from him being assassinated 2 months ago. What would happen? How chaotic would America be? Who would replace him? You know, would Biden have stepped down and had Kamala be there? Would Biden have won re-election and then all of a sudden a month later or a year later saying, I'm not feeling good, I'm going to step down and Kamala's going to be the president? Who knows what would have happened, right? Yeah. But the question I want to ask you is the following. So you're a member of parliament for 12 years, right? 05 to 17.
Yeah.
You're there. You have the Nigel Farage. You have all these names. You have Brexit going on. I mean, one of the biggest events, right, in UK in God knows how many decades. And when an event like this happened, how do you process it yourself, knowing if it happened once 60 days ago and it happens again 60 days later, and it's not going to happen again. That's just a one-time thing. Like, how many people do we have that have had 2 assassination attempts in 60 days, let alone period, ever, with shots, with guns, with, AK-47 being around there? How do you process that? Forget about what the world would have looked like. How do you process that? Is America becoming too immune to this happening? There's even some people that I tweeted something about of this happening, and this other fellow, and a lot of people on social media are responding and saying, well, this is his doing. He's causing this. It's how he's handling all this stuff. And what he's saying, if he wasn't like this, if he wasn't that combative, when a candidate for president stoking stochastic tensions all over the country, it becomes his business as usual. This is his fault. He's doing it.
Well, politics is really important, right? Who wins elections is really important. But when politics becomes your moral system, when you judge whether someone is a good person or a bad person, depending on whether or not they vote the way you do, this is the nightmare you end up with. You end up with a bitterly divided country where people who have political sympathies think it's okay to go and take out people they don't want to win elections. It's terrifying. And I think this is a warning sign. A republic cannot survive if it is so bitterly divided that politics has become a belief system in place of religion. It has become a religion to many people. And this is the nightmare scenario you end up with. Now, we don't know the full facts about what happened yesterday, but we do know what happened 60 days ago.
Yeah, but we also know that yesterday, the FBI came out and categorically put it as an assassination attempt, right? And did you see who the shooter was? Did you see when they were reporting on who the shooter was? What do you think about the shooter? A little bit of a strange guy, with his background. He went to Ukraine to want to defend Ukraine. And
he looks a little bit weird, and I think it's maybe significant that apparently, from what I read, he volunteered to join the Ukrainian army, and the Ukrainian army thought he's not quite
there.
What we're looking for.
Yeah.
And who knows though? I mean, what we do need to do is let this come out in a court of law.
Yeah, did you see the one thing, Rob? I don't know if you saw this or not. That one of the people that he followed him, was a Sue Kim. I don't know if you saw this one. If you go to Sue Kim, Rob, type in MLLESOOKIM on Twitter. If you can go to M as mom, L as Lima, E S as Sam, OOKIM. Okay, if you want to put this name in there. Okay, so if you go to it, read the profile, and her tweets are protected, right? So practice lead, ex-CIA, Rand Corporation, Yale, and you see her background, right? The interesting thing about this account, who's an ex-CIA, she followed him and he followed her. I don't know if you caught that or not. She followed the guy that was trying to attempt to assassinate. She followed him and he followed her. So some people are, sitting there like saying, hey, is this like an inside thing going on? Has this guy with weapons of mass destruction? And obviously it's a lot of skepticism and speculation here that we're doing.
I'd be a little skeptical. I mean, number one, I've got 80,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm sure some of them are probably slightly crazy. You can't hold it against someone that they've got crazy Twitter followers. Secondly, I think this sounds to me like it's one bad person. I don't think there's evidence of some sort of deeper conspiracy.
Oh, I mean, listen, if you got how many people do you follow? You got 80,000 followers, but how many people you follow?
About 3,000, I would guess.
You follow 3,000?
Something like that.
So if this guy followed, say, 300, okay, and that CIA person, go back to that CIA account that we were looking at, whatever that Sue Kim lady was, Rob, if you can just go back to her, that account. Can you go back to that account?
Does she follow me?
She follows 848.
Well,
right?
see if I follow her or she follows
It's private.
Me.
It's private. It's the thing. So it's 848. So it's just a little weird that she follows you back. Why would an ex-CIA, when you're saying Ukraine said this guy may be a little bit cuckoo and he had weapons of mass destruction, apparently had some weapons back in the days, 2002 that he got caught with. That again, this is where conversations start about and people start questioning things, saying it's just a little bit weird that this is going on. But okay, doesn't sound like you have more of a stronger opinion on this than what you said already. But let's go through a couple different things. UK, okay, your background. How different is your country today with what's happened the last 3-4 years with immigration? Maybe even 8 years. We can go 6 years, right? How different is your country today than 2004 before you chose to go become a member of parliament?
It's dramatically different. In the past few years, in the past 2 years, it's changed, and you can notice that change. I came to America 4 years ago. I visited the UK a few months ago. I noticed a change. 1 in every 27 people in the UK, 1 in every 27 has arrived in the country in the past 24 months. 40% of all foreign-born people living in Britain, 40% have arrived in the past 10 years.
Say that again, 40% have arrived the last 10 years.
Of all the foreign-born people living in the UK,
have came the last 10 years.
4 out of 10 of them have come in the past 10 years. It is a huge change. It's a noticeable change. And it's got all sorts of implications.
And what are you sensing this? So somebody may say, okay, well, that just means you have such a great country that you're attracting a lot of people that are coming from all over the country. Somebody may say, if you're attracting people like that, U.S. was number 1 in the world in immigration. We got 40 plus million people, 50 million plus people that come here because of the American dream, because how amazing this is and how awesome it is. Shouldn't that be complimentary? What do you say to people that say, well, that's a compliment
I'm an
to you,
immigrant
right?
myself. I moved to America. But the question I would have for the people who've been running Britain for the past 3-4 decades is, look, you've got all these people wanting to come to your country. Why have you not filtered out to make sure you get good quality people with skills and cultural compatibility? You've imported large numbers of people from cultures that are not culturally compatible with Britain, and we're starting to see the consequences of this. You've imported people with low skills, low value capital people, and actually this has made Britain poorer. Britain today is a poorer country per person than it was 15, 20 years ago. And the reason for that is because per capita GDP, that's the output per person, has declined because we've imported people from such low quality, low capital societies that they have lowered the overall value of the country per person. We've done it wrong.
So when I had your friend Douglas Murray on last week, 2 weeks, which I think you probably watched the interview, when I was speaking to him, I said, why don't you filter out who's coming in to see the data of who produces, like, for example, if a company's hiring people, I think the example I gave him, if I'm hiring people, our HR department's going to be looking, what company are they coming from? How much background did they have in the past? What university are they coming from? Where did they go to? What's their major? Level of experience before you let them in. And his answer was, we don't have the data. We can't ask those questions. We don't have it. Do you have?
I think some countries do actually have the data. Now, Douglas made a very good point. There are some countries like the UK that are very reluctant to catalogue and collect data by national background. And they're clearly fearful about doing that because they don't want the public to see the consequences of uncontrolled mass immigration from culturally incompatible countries. But actually, there have been some studies done that do begin to tell us some important facts. There was a Dutch study done by the University of Amsterdam, and they looked at the fiscal contribution of migrants coming from different parts of the world to the Dutch taxpayer. And it very clearly showed that people from Muslim countries were a net burden on the Dutch economy. They drew more in benefits than they contributed in tax revenue. But people from non-Muslim countries, particularly Western countries, culturally compatible countries, were a net benefit. If you're looking this up, you can look it up. It's University of Amsterdam. The study was done by a man called Van der Beek, B-E-E-K. Now, the Van der Beek study produces some really powerful evidence, I think, that you need to be selective. You need to be selective not only, Canada famously used to have a so-called points-based system of immigration where people who had certain educational attainment would be given more points, people who had skills would be given more points, and you had to get a certain number of points to qualify to go to Canada. If only they had stuck with that system. So I do think you need to select through a points-based system, but you also need to select for cultural compatibility. You need to prioritize importing people who have values that give them the potential to become part of Western society.
So when they did that, is this the study you're talking about? This one right here? This one shows this chart.
Is it by Van der Beek?
It is by Van der Beek, but it says regards as a self-Muslim, Turkish, Moroccan, Somali. Is that the one or no? This is a different one.
I don't think it is. I mean, he may have produced several papers. I don't.
Got it. Okay. So, and aside from that, did they find any types of Muslim that came in that were a net positive to society? Was it across the board, no matter where they're coming in from?
I mean, clearly they found the Horn of Africa were the biggest net drain on the Dutch taxpayer. That is people from Somalia, essentially. But you know, the biggest positive contribution in terms of economic input were people, actually migrants from the USA and from Japan.
Net positive.
Net positive. Yeah.
From USA and Japan.
Yeah.
And is this article an article that shows by country which were the net negatives or no?
Yeah.
So Rob, I actually want to see this now. I'm actually really curious. So you said the guy's name is Van der Beek.
Van der Beek.
And then University of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And do you remember what the name of the article was? Or
no. I mean, one way, if you're looking it up, look at a website called Unheard. That's UNHERD, Unheard, and then look up the University of Amsterdam Dutch fiscal immigration, and it should come up. No, unheard.org. Sorry.
Unheard.org.
They've written an article about it, unheard.org.
Oh, it's not even a website. It doesn't come up.
Unheard?
UNHEARD?
HERD.
HERD.
Yeah.
Got it.
As in a herd of cattle.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Unheard. That's also not coming up. Okay. This one is coming up. But Rob, are you seeing it?
It's telling me the site is under development.
Go into Google. Type in UNHERD. Yeah, that's the website. And it's an article that appeared there, I think, towards the end of last year. So type in under the search feature, Dutch immigration, and it should come up.
Oh, it's unheard.com is what it was. Okay, got it. So if Dutch immigration, click on that, Rob, see if it comes up. You have no idea how bad I want to see this data. You have no idea how bad I want to see this data.
Well, try the Google search. Do it in Google.
Let's see. Immigration cost states $17 billion.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
That's the one.
Okay, so I found it, Rob. So it's the one that says it cost, Unheard.
That's the one.
Got it. So if you want to go lower and see if there's anything about by country. So zoom in a little bit, Rob, if I can read this one. Not much has been seen. A team of mathematicians, Van der Beek, at the University of Amsterdam, estimates that Dutch government spends approximately $17 billion a year on immigration between 1995 and 2019. And that is more, meaning that more than 1 billion euros went to migration-related issues every month. Mm-hmm. The study digs deeper. Annual net costs of non-Western immigration amounts to $17 billion, and annual net benefits of Western migration to $1 billion, distinguishing between Western and non-Western migration patterns.
Now, on Twitter, you should be able to find an awesome graphic for the same paper.
Meanwhile, the picture in Germany is much different. About 45% of those who receive unemployment benefits are non-German citizens. 45%, costing the taxpayer around $20 billion a year. Austria similar, which 60% of recipients are having a migrant background. So these are entitlement programs that are people who are citizens who were born there are paying for 60%. That is pretty wild statistics. And it continues to say, in some European countries, immigrants are well integrated into the labor market, 70% in Denmark, 60% in Poland, and the Czech Republic, and 50% in Netherlands, UK, and Ireland. But in others, such as Germany and Austria, the number remains below 20%. Mm-hmm. Rob, did you find a chart on Twitter to see what the top...
That's not it.
I want to see who it is. Because I want to see, what I'm trying to find out is the following. So just so you know, and the audience is listening to know what I'm trying to go with. I want to go find out who from what Muslim nation that comes in is in the net positive society and why?
Do another search on Twitter. Type in Danish immigration, crime, nationality. That will produce a superb graph that will answer that question very graphically. No. There, that one.
Zoom in.
Now, this is the number of men. Now, these are Danish born. These are people who are born in Denmark.
Okay.
And this is the country that their parents originated from. This is the percentage of them who have a criminal record by the age of 30. 70% of people
who came from Kuwait.
No. Who are born in Denmark. These are Danish born, but their parents came from Kuwait. 70% of people of Kuwaiti origin who are born in Denmark have a criminal record by the age of 30.
That is insane.
Indeed.
68% Ethiopia, 64% Jordan, 62% Somalia and Syria, 60% Uganda and Lebanon.
And you can't say that this is because of the difficulty of moving, because their parents made them move. These are people who have been born in Denmark.
So the first one that you could say is it fair to say that top 9 is all Muslim? Kuwait, Ethiopia, Jordan, Somalia, Syria, Uganda, Lebanon, Morocco, Algeria?
Ethiopia and Uganda are not, I mean, there are Muslims living in both countries, but they're not majority Muslim. No.
What would you say Ethiopia's majority, the religion?
Christian, largely.
Christian. Okay, so then one could argue you got Kuwait, Jordan, Somalia, Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, Algeria.
I think you can say the top 10, 7 of the top 10 are majority Muslim.
Maybe even 8 because you got Iraq there as well, right? So then you have Brazil, then you have North Macedonia, then you have Iran, Egypt, Afghanistan, Turkey. Keep going lower up to see if there's others here. Pakistan, and then Norway, UK, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Poland, Iceland. Denmark themselves, 18%. Germany, 20%. Thailand, 20%. Vietnam, 22%.
I think you would logically use Denmark as the benchmark, wouldn't you?
Right. So the average kid born in Denmark, pre-30, only 18% of them commit a crime.
There's a different graphic that shows criminality amongst the first generation. And that is even more, I don't know if you can find that. No, it's not that graph. Maybe try that one. Try that one. No, go back, that one.
Zoom
Look
in.
at that.
Go down.
This is even more telling. This includes first generation. These are violent criminal conviction rates in Denmark by nation of origin. And I think there you clearly show Kuwait, Tunisia, Lebanon, Somalia, Jordan, Uganda, Morocco, often countries that were represented in the first graphic, represented in this.
So at the top, you would see, violent crime conviction rate in Denmark by nation of origin, 2010 to 2021. Kuwait, what number would you put that in, Rob? What percentile is it if you go all the way to the bottom? Because I can't see the number.
And notice the red ones are Muslim majority countries.
90%. So red ones are Muslim majority. So let's see the colors on the bottom, what it is. Oh, it's not going to show the colors. No, it's not going to do that.
The conviction rate is relative to the Danish conviction rate.
Wow. So the red is Muslim.
Yeah.
Blue is what? Europe?
Europe, yeah.
Okay, or Western. Got it. Go all the way up, Rob. Let's look at the top one more time again. So at the top is Kuwait. 90% violent.
No. That is, scroll all the way down to the bottom. Now, that is not the percentage. That's not 90%. That is over and above the
average in Denmark.
Danish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the top is Kuwait.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, you've got all those Muslim countries at the top overrepresented. Way down the bottom, you've got India, where actually criminality is very, very low. Now, surely that is very telling. The fact that in India, migrants to Denmark from India are committing relatively few offences.
In Denmark.
In Denmark, yeah.
So can you go to the bottom to see who does less than even citizens who are from Denmark? Go in. So black is Denmark. That's the standard. So Ireland, Romania, Bulgaria, Finland, France, UK, Portugal, Sweden, Norway, Estonia, Spain, Switzerland, Netherlands, Hungary, Greece, China, even China, Italy, Germany, Indonesia, Canada, Belgium, Philippines, Ukraine, India,
those
Argentina,
are so law-abiding. Wow.
Look at US and Japan all the way at the bottom.
Yeah, they're so law-abiding. Citizens from those countries, they're committing fewer offences than the Danish population
So
results.
what does one learn from this? So you're saying law-abiding citizens. What is the reason, if one does research with this, somebody can watch this and say, come on, Douglas, you're an Islamophobe. Let's face it, that's what you are, and you're kind of pointing this out. The average, somebody who's a Muslim may look at this and not be happy with the data that you're bringing up here. But why is it that certain communities are comfortable following law and order, whatever it is, and some are not?
All I'm using this to point out is that there is an issue when it comes to immigration of cultural compatibility. That is to say, people from some societies are more likely to integrate than people from other societies. Now, this is not to criticize different cultures or different people. My criticism is aimed at the governments of Britain and Western Europe because they believe in something called cultural relativism. And this is the reason why Britain and Western Europe are in such a mess. This ideology of cultural relativism, which is the ruling belief system of the elites in Britain, is that all cultures are of equal worth and that people are interchangeable. It instantly leads people to believe that if you import, say, 20,000 Haitians to Ohio, you're importing the next generation of Wright brothers or the next Neil Armstrong. I would suggest that actually you're probably not. Cultural relativism allows Western governments to make these elementary mistakes. And that is the intention of me pointing this out. It's to criticize Western governments for believing that cultural relativism is a good way of running a country. It is a disastrous way of running a country. For a start, if you believe in cultural relativism, that all cultures are of equal worth, what's the incentive to integrate when you move? Now, when I moved my family from Britain to the United States, I made absolutely sure that second day at school, my daughter knew the words to the Pledge of Allegiance. I celebrate July the 4th perhaps more patriotically than most people in my neighborhood. I do everything I can to value and cherish.
Why do you? Why do you think that's what you're supposed to do?
Because I came here for a better way of life, and it's the values of America and the culture of America that allow me to lead a better way of life.
So you think you're indebted to this country for this country allowing you to come here and exist?
Absolutely. Oh. And I am hugely indebted. I am the beneficiary. My family is the beneficiary of good decisions that were made by Americans, not just today, but Americans have been making good decisions for 240 years. I'm the beneficiary of that. I should cherish that. I shouldn't want to change and transplant my values onto that.
So why do you think the opposition, where somebody comes here in Ilhan Omar, right? Or some folks that are in Dearborn or other parts of the country that come in and they're Muslim and they're coming and saying, well, no, I don't agree with your way of living. I just like the fact that economically this is a better place, but my beliefs are my beliefs and I'm going to impose it on you. And America's not going to be number one to me first. I'm going to be my faith, my heritage first, then you.
This is the danger of cultural relativism.
Right.
Because if you believe in cultural relativism, you validate that point of view and you allow that point of view, and that point of view takes over. If you actually believe that Western culture is a better way of life than non-Western culture, and the American branch of Western culture is perhaps the pinnacle of human achievement that has created the greatest society on earth, if you buy into that, then you create this desire to integrate. Look, no American government ever forced people from Italy and Poland to integrate. They chose to because they wanted to, because there was something valued about Americanness. In America, people aren't required to hang the flag from the porch and celebrate July the 4th. It's a spontaneous celebration of what it is to be American. If the elites don't believe in American exceptionalism, why would a first-generation migrant to America want to become part of the American family?
No, I get that. But what I'm trying to see the argument on the other side. Look, I'm just here because when you ask, somebody, I had a debate here with 2 Christians and 2 Muslims, and he asked the question, if America's so bad, why are you moving here, but why are Christians not moving to Muslim nations? And they'll say, well, part of it is because economically this is a better place. And U.S. has created so many policies that's destroyed the Middle East. So the reason why the economy in the Middle East is bad is because it's America's fault.
That's profoundly, utterly wrong.
Please unpack that. Why?
I grew up in a small republic in the middle of Central Africa, and the experience of growing up there taught me how vulnerable civilization is. The ability of people to live freely and to freely exchange is what creates wealth. And it's very precious and it's very rare. The norm in human history and human civilization is for powerful people to predate of weak people. What is extraordinary about America is that it is a society in which it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you're equal under the law, contracts can be enforced. That is why America's rich. America hasn't grown rich by making other countries poor. America has grown rich because people in America are free to exchange. And actually, I would then argue that America has used her strength to elevate the condition of humankind. There have been many, many great powers in human history, from the British to the Babylonians, from the Romans to the Russians. America is the first great power in human history that has not created an empire. She has insisted upon the dismantling of the old empires. In fact, America sent farm boys from the Midwest to go and die in the fields of Europe in the First World War, the Second World War. When America stared down Soviet communism, America has used her strength to keep people free, to keep the world free. America's not an imperial exploiter. America is the opposite, the absolute opposite of that. The idea that America is rich by keeping other countries poor is just nonsense.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that go to school in America who are being persuaded and maybe brainwashed. You can use manipulated or gaslit, whatever word you want to use, any of those, to believe that some parts of the world who are being oppressed is because America is doing that to them. Okay, and that America is playing the puppet master. If they want a country to fall, hey, let's do a proxy war and let's use this guy to cause this one to fall. And hey, what do we have over there? There's a lot of money to be made with weapons to sell. Afghanistan, like weapons of mass destruction. Say there's that, and then boom, let's blame these guys. So that's what they say sometimes. That's the debate going on right now.
You can make some fair criticisms of America.
Right.
I mean, I think LBJ's policy in
64
in Vietnam was a disaster.
Oh, God.
Why America ever got caught up in what was essentially France's anti-colonial war was a disaster. I think American elites' naivety about multiculturalism led them to believe that they could recreate Western-style democracy in the Middle East. And I think that cultural relativism that infected the thinking of the State Department has led America to make mistakes over the past 20 or 30 years. But American mistakes pale into comparison compared to other countries' mistakes. America's biggest critic is the United States. When America gets it wrong, it's Americans criticizing Americans. America is generally being a force for good. A country that, I come from a small island off the northwest coast of Europe. I think it's fair to say that my country would probably have been invaded by Nazi Germany if it wasn't for the United States. The world owes a huge debt to America for keeping liberal democracy alive. We are a better place to live because of America. If you want to know what America or the world would look like if America retreated, and this is where I have a real beef with some conservatives in America who talk about isolationism. If you want to know what the world would look like without America, think of Afghanistan after America's withdrawal, the barbarism that returned, the tyranny, the horror show that is now Afghanistan. That's what the world without America would look like. It would be a very dark and horrible place.
Yeah, I think that there is a, I like to hear both sides out to see what the point is, because as a guy that's a former vet, and I was in the Army, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, for me, I think the strongest defense is having a very, very strong offense and military, to the point where you put the fear of death into your opponent.
Have you heard about the film Reagan that's just come out?
Oh, yeah. We had Dennis Quaid. We hosted an event. He flew out. We did a live event with a couple hundred people. We watched the movie a month and a half ago. The movie starts off with the spy talking about the fact that they spied on him for 17 years.
That movie really brings it out, this idea that if you want a strong defense, prepare to defend yourself. Have a really big, strong military.
For sure. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
But Reagan understood that.
But the part about it is when you pull up data and you're like, okay, how many military bases do we have worldwide, U.S.? I don't know what the number is. I think it's 780, Rob. If you know how many total military bases does U.S. have other places? I mean, I don't know. If you just search and see what number comes up. Okay, 800, right? Mm-hmm. So despite recent closing hundreds of bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, the U.S. still maintains nearly 800 military bases in more than 70 countries and territories abroad, from giant little Americans to small radar facilities. Britain, France, and Russia, by contrast, have about 34 bases combined, right? Combined.
And America has bases in Britain.
Right. So to me, a part of that, what is that cost? And what are we getting in return? If we have a military base in another country, are we asking them to pay for the cost? to feel protected? So are you paying for it? If we come and make your country safer, I think the only thing for
Europe's been freeloading off America for years.
Well, that's the part that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. So the first time around, you know, where a lot of Americans started paying attention to what NATO was going is when Trump started saying, why aren't you paying for it? We're protecting you. Why don't you pay? And then the average person's like, wait a minute, you're right. Well, you're living in my apartment where you're not paying rent. Why are you living here? You pay the rent. This border is more important for you to be safe than ours.
It's worse than that. Europe has huge amounts of welfare programs. Europe spends money that it should be spending on its defense, paying people to sit at home and do nothing.
Right.
Europe has all these generous welfare programs because it counts on America picking up the tab for its defense. So I think America should, and it would be good for Europe to have America insist that Europe pays for its way on defense. Europe hasn't done that for 50 years, and it needs to start doing that.
Okay, so let's go to Ukraine. You're for some, would you say you're for U.S. helping Zelensky, funding his war against Russia and defending him? You're for that?
I'm for that, yes.
Okay, tell me why.
Ronald Reagan, if he was sitting here, I think would have understood the value of the United States being able to basically defeat and dismantle the Russian Empire for the cost that's roughly less than it costs to fund the US Marine Corps every year. It's a big sum overall, but it's relatively, in defense terms, a relatively modest amount. You are debilitating the ability of a monstrous Russian empire to project power. It's no cost to American lives. You are dealing with a huge geopolitical enemy at relatively low cost. I think if you had said to Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, for that amount of money, you can basically take out the Soviet system as a threat, he would have said that was a bargain. I think it is a good thing. Incidentally, I think it's also a good thing to show tyrants, not just in Moscow, but in Beijing, that you cannot use might to invade other countries. This is, I think, why Ukraine is so important. It's not just important for the Poles and the Baltics and the Europeans. If Putin was allowed to get away with invading Ukraine, what's to stop China, which has land disputes with most of its neighbors? What's to stop China taking Taiwan? What's to stop Turkey trying to recreate the Ottoman Empire? There are all sorts of reasons why I think it's in all of our interests that Ukraine is allowed to remain a sovereign free country.
Okay, so fine. And you know, a person who's reasonable may sit there and say, okay, Douglas, you're making your argument for that. However, if we are giving the money to Ukraine and we're raising all this money to him and he's coming in, a lot of reports are coming in that he's taking money off the table and a lot of his generals are making money. Let's say some of it is true. A lot of money has been missing. Sure. So you don't know who's getting the money, who's not getting the money. And there's people that say it's very dirty on what's going on over there. But let's set that aside. Let's just say he's been very honorable, right? And we keep pushing. And some people are saying, let's accelerate the process of getting Ukraine to be part of NATO and making them a member. But no, you're shaking your head. That happened last year, July.
I don't want Ukraine in NATO for a very simple reason. If a country's in NATO, it means that if they're invaded, would I be willing to send my countrymen to go and die for it? And I think I probably would for Poland. There's history there. I think I would for France and Germany. I certainly would for America. I would be willing to commit to having British people die in their tens of thousands in defense of those countries. I'm not sure that I would want to do that in Ukraine. You got to draw the line somewhere. And for me, Poland is probably the boundary.
Well, that's good you're doing it. But a lot of last year was support for Ukraine. Yeah, last year, July 12th, New York Times. This is when Biden was given the support for Ukraine. A lot of people were talking about accelerating the process of them joining NATO. Right now, this is not your position. You're not saying that. But they're flirting with that. And then Putin is being asked this question. I think it's yesterday or a couple of days ago. Rob, if you can play this clip. This is Putin. Go for it.
В последние дни мы видим и слышим, как на очень высоком уровне Великобритании и США муссируется тема о том, что киевский режим сможет наносить удары вглубь территории России западными вооружениями большой дальности. И, судя по всему, это решение либо вот-вот будет принято, либо, судя по всему, вообще уже принято. И эта вещь, конечно, экстраординарная. Хотелось попросить прокомментировать то, что происходит.
Происходит попытка подмены понятий. Потому что речь не идет о разрешении или запрете киевскому режиму наносить удары по российской территории. Он и так наносит с помощью беспилотных летательных аппаратов и другими средствами. Но когда речь идет об использовании высокоточного оружия большой дальности западного производства, это совершенно другая история. Дело в том, что я уже об этом говорил, и любые эксперты это подтвердят, и у нас, и на Западе. Наносить удары современными высокоточными системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Это возможно только с использованием разведданных со спутников, которыми Украина не располагает. Это данные только со спутников или Евросоюза, либо на Соединенных Штатах, в общем, с натовских спутников. Это первое. Второе, и очень важное, может быть, ключевое, заключается в том, что полетные задания в эти ракетные системы могут, по сути, вносить только военнослужащие стран НАТО. Украинские военнослужащие делать это не могут. И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут.
Do you agree with him on what he's saying?
I don't agree or disagree. I think if, going back to the movie Reagan, watching it, what was clear to me is that Reagan and Thatcher knew when to do a deal, when to be strong, and when to concede.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if wise heads of the Thatcher-Reagan mold might say, don't push this guy too far. He's sitting on a massive nuclear arsenal. Don't humiliate.
I agree.
I would be uncomfortable about the United Kingdom doing something that went beyond supporting the Ukrainians defending themselves. If that becomes an offensive campaign, I think it opens up a potential can of worms you don't want to go near.
But you categorically, so maybe for the audience, this is how I interpreted what he said. If they attack us with weapons they have, go for it. It's a war between us. But if you attack us with weapons made by the West, that's been given to you, you use that, that's officially U.S., fighting us. And if that happens, that's World War, that you're flirting with. So that is the part where if you're for supporting Ukraine, given the money that you said it's almost the equivalent of Marines' annual budget, which is roughly $52 billion. I think they've given it so far, I don't know what the number is, but money that's been out there, $200 billion total, but I think of it, I don't know what the number is, $53.5 billion or some number like that you'll find. You're saying it's worth us giving them money, even if it's some weapons from here to prevent Russia from doing what it's doing. Your position is that.
I support Ukraine, and I think it's good that America and Britain and the West are supporting Ukraine.
Including giving them weapons?
Giving them weapons, but this mustn't become a proxy attack on Russia.
What are the ways
it's a defense? Well, there's a difference between defending Ukraine's territorial integrity and attacking Russia. There were drone attacks on Moscow. That should make us all feel very uncomfortable.
Okay, so you're not fully there. You're not for flirting with a possible world war, but we are flirting.
I think maybe a good model might have been the former Yugoslavia. You got to be careful. Are you in favor of Croatia becoming independent, or are you out to demonize and humiliate Serbia? Now, Serbia didn't have nuclear weapons. When the US ended up bombing Serbia, they could kind of get away with it because it was only Serbia. You've got to be very careful you don't end up in a situation where you get a direct conflict between Russia and America. And, some of the greatest champions of freedom and liberty and America in the West, Thatcher and Reagan, understood that there is sometimes a time when you have to compromise with people you don't want to compromise with. Now, I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm saying that you don't want to escalate this. Russia is a nuclear power. There is a real danger, I think, if you make this a NATO-Russia conflict, you don't know where it's going to end.
Yeah, and did you hear Erdogan talking about taking Turkey out of possibly leaving NATO to join BRICS? Did you see that last week?
I heard about that.
Right.
I mean, I've become increasingly uncomfortable with Turkey and NATO.
Here's a bit for BRICS is always strategic and symbolic. Some analysts says spook the West.
Turkey's a great disappointment. I used to believe 20, 30 years ago that Turkey showed that we were all converging towards a sort of end of history of liberal democracy. And Turkey was a sort of prime example of that. I think what we're seeing in Turkey under Erdogan is Turkey almost reverting to a sort of an Ottoman tradition. And it's a big disappointment what's happened in Turkey over the past 20, 30 years. Interestingly, Turkey's become increasingly unsuccessful economically precisely because as it becomes more traditionally Ottoman, I think it's starting to create a political system that makes it harder for the economy to grow. So the incredible growth in the Turkish economy over the past 20, 30 years, I think, is jeopardized as well.
Got it. Do you know Dominik Tarczyński?
No.
From Poland?
Oh, yes. The former MEP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have an opinion on him?
I mean, I think he is someone who is doing what his voters in Poland wants, which is to make sure that you don't get mass immigration from countries that are culturally incompatible.
I can't believe the stats with them. The lowest rape, lowest crime, lowest unemployment, and the lowest number of Muslims living in his country, in Poland. You once said
when Kathy Newman interviewed him,
that was the best.
She was
not even one.
She was attacking him as though he would be ashamed of it, and he said, "No,
this is what I stand for." Yeah. So you've said in the past before. You can correct me on this. Islam is not compatible. Your words. Islam is not compatible with the way of living of the West. What did you mean by that?
There was a man called Syed Qutb who lived in Egypt in the early to mid-20th century. And he was the father of what you might call Islamism. Now, Islamism is different from Islam. Islamism is the political ideology of Islamic extremism. And he wrote a book called Milestones, which tries to explain why the Muslim world hasn't been as successful as the Western world. And it's basically a sort of it's like the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto is to communism. It puts forward a very simplistic explanation for the relative failure of the Muslim world, and it led rise to political Islamism, the Muslim Brotherhood, and variants of that have we now know today as political extremism. I think Islamism, and it's a key distinction to make, Islamism is not compatible with Western values. It's rather like liberation theology in 1960s South America. It is a superficially plausible explanation that is in fact deeply flawed and dangerous. But this ideology of Islamism is not compatible with living in the West. And I think if one of the great questions for countries like Britain, where there are now 4 million Muslims, is what percentage of the Muslim population in Britain is able to embrace liberal democratic values as believers of their faith, but who are nonetheless citizens of a Western democracy, and what percentage of that population is committed to Islamism, which is not compatible.
Can you be specific? What do you mean by Islamism is not compatible? Specific, like because of this, because of that? Because what are the specifics?
I mean, there was a survey done about 10 years ago showing that 36% of...
This one right here?
Hi, everyone. I'm Douglas Carswell. You can join me on Minect, where you can ask me any question you want. Why I believe in American exceptionism. What made me leave Brexit Britain and come to Mississippi, the greatest state, I think, in America. You can ask me any question you want, and I'll answer it directly. Look forward to hearing from you.
A poll more than 1,000 British Muslims conducted by Policy Exchange think tank found that 36% of Muslims ages 16 to 24 believe those who convert to another faith should be punished by death. Apostate, I think, is what they call it.
Apostasy is the idea that if you leave your faith, whatever that faith is, it's somehow a crime to abandon that faith. Now, I would argue that if you live in the West, you live under religious freedom. That means you're free to pursue your religion, but it also means that you're free to renounce your religion. You could be an atheist who renounces their atheism. You could be a Catholic who renounces Catholicism. You could be a Jew or a Muslim who renounces your faith. No one should wish you any ill for doing so. Religious freedom means you're free to renounce your faith. If you've got in a country like the UK, over a third of young Muslims, and presumably they're now middle-aged Muslims because that survey was quite old, if you've got a sizable chunk of the population who adhere to this Islamist belief that people who abandon their faith should be killed, you have a problem. If you have a sizable chunk of the Muslim population in Britain thinking that people who are gay should be punished and that homosexuality should be outlawed, I think you've got a problem. These are things that we can't skate over. We have to address them. And if we believe in liberal democracy and freedom, we need to bring this conversation out and have it in the open. We cannot have a sizable chunk of the British population thinking that people who abandon their faith should be murdered.
What else? What else is not compatible? So that's one, apostate, which, by the way, if you want to pull up the data, and I kind of look at it when you go to apostate, it varies percentage-wise depending on what country. Rob, I just sent you a picture. I think Afghanistan is 78%. Which is the highest one if you leave. And by the way, you can Google if you want to, Rob, and this is what I Googled, and it'll come up, but I send you the picture. If you search the following, the search is what percentage of Muslims believe in apostate. Yeah, that's it right there. If you can zoom in a little bit. Death penalty for leaving Islam, right? Amongst Muslims who say Sharia law should be law of the land, percentage who favored the death penalty for converts. Can you zoom in a little bit more, Rob? Okay, Bosnia, 15%, Russia, 15%, Kosovo, 11%, Albania, 8%, Tajikistan, 22%, Turkey, 17%, Kazakhstan, 4%, Kyrgyzstan, 14%, Malaysia, 62%, Thailand, 27%, Indonesia, 18%, Afghanistan, 79%, Pakistan, 76%, Bangladesh, 44%, Egypt, 86%, Jordan, 82%, Palestinian territory, 66%, Lebanon, 46%, Iraq, 42%, Tunisia, 29%.
I think I'm right in saying that shows the number who want to make Sharia law the official law.
Can you go up to see it? Yeah. Among Muslims who say Sharia law should be the law of the land.
It's amongst those who think that Sharia should be the law of the land.
Yes.
The percentage who favor the death penalty.
Yes.
Which is not quite the same as what I was talking about.
The 36%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, remember earlier when I asked you and I said, what percentage of Muslims coming from what country are a net positive to society for you to be able to decipher and say, hey, because I ran an insurance company and we had, I'd never worked with a Scientologist before. One day we recruited a Scientologist in our office. Guy comes on board. I'm like, all right, let me see what it is to work with these guys. Some of the hardest working people in the world were Scientologists.
Sure.
They were disciplined. Sure. They worked hard. Some of them came from the Q organization. I think it's called the C organization, something like that. And there's some horror stories. I interviewed some of the guys that had some bad things to say about Scientology. But my experience working with them, a couple of the guys were from the Sea Org, right? This is where if you work here, these guys work 20-hour days in many cases.
Sure. I mean, it's very easy to find someone from, a background who is a good worker. I mean, there are...
That's not my point isn't that, though. My point was, so I work with Scientologists. My impression, forget about L. Ron Hubbard, conspiracy, all this other stuff that people, how much money you have to give to them. Oh, David Miscavige's wife is missing and Leah Remini. I know all that stuff. I've followed all that stuff. But they were great to work with. Mormons. You can go and make a case about God makers this and Mormons this and Joseph Moroni this.
But I don't think many Mormons in Britain are currently in the process of bombing and...
Maybe you're not getting my question. This is what I'm doing. So it's my fault. Let me unpack it for you. Within the sect of Christianity, you can have Catholics, Presbyterian, non-denominational, you can have Mormon, Jehovah, Seventh-day. You can really break it down, right? And you can even break it down to see who makes the most money, who's the best net positive to society, which marriages worked out, who has the most kids. You can break that down, okay? I can also do that from Asia, Japan, Buddhism. I can do Indian in America. They do very well. There's the highest earning immigrants in America are Indian descent. They make more money than Americans do by a mile. It's not even close. So then I can unpack Muslims. In the company I ran, at this point, we've licensed 60,000 insurance agents. We recruit a lot of Muslims. Mm-hmm. And some of them I would admit, I'm like, freaking love working with you. You're a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was is there a way to decipher who produces the most peaceful ones that if they come to you, they integrate, they're proud to be Americans, they're proud to be Brits, they're proud to be part of your society or organization, to give you the respect, but say, look, at the same time, I'm a Muslim.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the majority of British Muslims, and Britain has gone from having 1.5 million Muslims in 2001 to 4 million today. The majority of British Muslims sign up to exactly what you and I would, I think, subscribe to. But it's having a sizable minority. Western countries, I think, need to exactly have this conversation. How do you differentiate? What are the markers?
It's data. You just need data, right?
Well, I think one of the key litmus tests is this question of apostasy. If you fundamentally believe that people who abandon their faith should be murdered, then you're probably not going to become a fully integrated member of Western society.
And if I'm not mistaken, you said once, those who live in a Western country who believe in Sharia law should be revoke their citizenship. I think you said this,
right? You
right?
need to be prepared to do that, yes.
You need to be prepared to do that. Okay. Who has tested that? Who has tried that out? And how do you filter that out? I mean, a person could lie to you, right? And be like, no, I don't support it. But of course I do, behind closed doors. And then, hey, let's keep having more kids and let's take over politics. Look what's going on with the mayor of London. Look what's going on with many politicians in UK. Even in this, in US is also happening as well. So we can say, nah, not really. And then later on, yeah, I believe that. I changed my mind. What are you going to do about it now? It's too late, right? One could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I'm right in saying that Germany and Sweden have recently begun to deport some migrants from some countries.
Really?
Yeah. And I think I'm right in saying, now I only clocked it on social media, I may have got this wrong, but I think I'm right in saying Sweden is just starting a program offering people or toying with the idea of repatriating people who are not doing a great job of integration. You may want to Google and check that first. But I think countries in Western Europe are beginning to think along these lines.
Wow. Yeah, I just saw an AP News article here.
Yeah. Sweden will offer migrants $34,000 to go home. Now, this is very, very new. It's 3 days ago. But clearly, I'm not the only person thinking about this. Now, how do you design a program
Rob,
to do
can you
this?
unpack? I want to read this. Can you open it up, please? Just open up that article if you could.
It's a voluntary scheme, it should be pointed out.
So Sweden will offer migrants $34,000, and the government greatly increased a grant to encourage more immigrants to go home. Critics say it sends the wrong message, and in any case may not tempt many refugees go lower. Sweden nation, long known for its open arms policy towards migrants, plans to drastically increase its cash offer by 35 times. Holy shit, $34,000. On Thursday, the Scandinavian country's right-wing government announced that it would raise the existing benefit from 10,000 krona, which is about $978 per adult, to 35,000, 350,000, and the reduced red tape involved in applying for the grant and bid to create more awareness about the incentive and attract more takers. The existing benefit includes a cap for 40,000 families, 40,000 krona, or 3717. No cap was announced for the increased grant. The increase, which will take in effect in 2026, goes against the advice of government-appointed inquiry, which said, as a report last month, that prompting reparations would hinder migrants' integration into Swedish society. Potential gains do not appear large enough to justify the risk. Makes sense. The step is one part of a larger shift in policy and rhetoric for Sweden, long known as a refugee. For those fleeing war-torn and strife-ridden countries, it is now among a growing number of European nations embracing a harder stance on immigration amid a rise in right-wing and populist parties. Interesting.
Now, this is the New York Times, so it would be impossible for them to write about this without trying to character assassinate the people doing it.
Then let me read this. Sweden's coalition government is propped up by Sweden's Democrats, a far-right party that won the second highest number of seats in 2022. The party began as a neo-Nazi movement in the 1980s, but rebranded itself as a conservative party with curbing migration at the center of its platform. Reforming Sweden's migration policy was non-negotiable during the coalition talks with interesting.
So,
had more than 250,000 refugees in 2020. The latest year refugee was available. About 70 people applied. So only 70 people have applied, and only one got it. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, 16,000 migrants from Africa, Middle East, Central voluntarily left Sweden without any grant last year. Interesting. It tells you something about how little known this is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is 3 days old, this policy. And
wow.
I think there are going to be issues with implementing it. And I think also you've got to be very careful about unintended consequences. if you're paying people $34,000 to do something, they might take advantage of it in all sorts of ways. But what's interesting about this is it shows that, here is a serious government in Europe, a government that is famous for having been relatively liberal on immigration policy, coming up with a proposal to repatriate people who haven't integrated. Interestingly, yesterday, Germany closed its borders. I don't mean shut as in preventing people from crossing them, but the open border policy that allowed people to come in from across Europe, that has now gone. One of the key tenets of European integration, the idea that borders weren't needed and that anyone could cross over, that's now gone. Germany is now scrutinizing people coming into Germany. Again, I think this is telling. This is a beginning of a trend. The people who run Western European countries are starting to recognize that they're going to have to change a lot of long-standing assumptions about the ability of people to move freely around Western Europe and to come into Western Europe.
Look, I made a video, Rob, I made a video 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And I said, if you hate America, if it's terrible, if I was a politician, I'd give you $100,000 to leave America and give up your passport and your citizenship. Get out of here. Go anywhere else you want to go to. You don't need to be here.
And there are so many people around the world who would make brilliant Americans. I felt when I came to America that I was coming home, even though I hadn't come here. I felt I was always born to be in America, destined to be in America. There are so many people like that around the world who would make great Americans. Look at all those people from India coming here, working incredibly hard.
They love it here.
They love it here.
Oh my God, they love it here. They're net positive to society.
They're huge high achievers.
Right, they are.
Look at the guy who put people up in outer space yesterday. He came here from South Africa. Look at the guys who founded Google and the big tech companies. They came from, I think some of them came from Ukraine. People come from all around the world to make a contribution.
Yeah.
America can choose the brightest and the best. We should do so.
I think so as well. If you're Goldman Sachs, you should keep hiring the best. You're Goldman Sachs. If you're Elon Musk, you should hire the best. By the way, you know what's trending today on Twitter? You know what hashtag is trending on Twitter today, Rob? If you want to go to Twitter, let's show this. What's trending on Twitter today? Can you go to hashtags to see what's trending today on the right? If you show more, one of the key things trending on Twitter today is deport Elon Musk. Can you imagine? Deport Elon Musk. If you just go type
That's insane. Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who has done more for human progress. I mean, he allows countries that have never had any technology to suddenly access broadband at low cost through Starlink. And he only built that company to pay for his trip to Mars. I mean, this guy is a hero like the Wright brothers times 10. And people are against him.
Did you find it, Rob?
There it is.
You see it? 76,000 people are using a hashtag right now, deport Elon Musk. Okay.
Wow.
If you go show the screenshot of it right there, look at that.
This is
on my page right now, and I'm looking at Twitter. Pull up what I'm seeing on my Twitter. Rob, I just sent you a picture. If you just upload that picture and show it, the number one trending in U.S. right now is deport insane. Elon Musk. The guy owns this app, and he allows the hashtag deport Elon Musk to be used.
Here's an interesting question.
Zoom into the right. Look at that.
Would Elon Musk have done any of these things if he had not moved to America? No, of course he wouldn't.
Oh, no, you're talking about Tesla, SpaceX, all this stuff. No.
If you stayed in South Africa, you'd probably be
no
managed.
way. Yeah. No, it wouldn't happen. And that's the reason why he's fighting. He can't speak for himself, but the impression he gives you is that's the reason why he's fighting the way he is.
He understands American exceptionalism.
He understands American exceptionalism, but I mean, look, and we there's a lot of people that support what he's doing. By the way, have you ever read the book Committee of 300?
No.
Have you heard of it? Like, do you know anything about it or no? Yeah. The whole concept of the book of a Committee of 300 is, if you want to, let me just read the basic plot of what this is about. So the background of it. Is this the one, Rob? Yeah, this is the one. Known as the Olympians. So people claim
I'm not a great conspiracy theorist.
Let me just read this to you. Claims that a powerful group of people founded by British aristocracy in 1727, proponents of the theory aligning with the committee existence, believed to be international council that organizes politics, commerce, banking, media, military for centralized global efforts. The theory dates to a statement made by a German politician, Walter, in 1909, where he says 300 men, all of whom know one another, guide the economic destinies of the continent and seek their successes from their own milieu.
I'm not a great conspiracy theorist, and let me tell you why I think that is nonsense. I mean, I know a lot of the people who run Britain, and they are singularly incompetent. they can't even control the country's borders. The idea that they're capable of global conspiracy is absurd.
But
they can't even run a bath.
But do you know what is the word used in this book that kind of does make sense? Forget about what this, whether it's accurate or not. God knows how many books I've read myself that, there used to be a time if you were even seen carrying Atlas Shrugged, you were the most selfish human being in the world if you read Ayn Rand, because God forbid you read Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. You're a horrible human being, right? But the one thing it talks about in the book, it talks about watering down your national identity so you can change your culture. The key to changing culture is to water down the national identity. Are you seeing the current strategy of what's happening to UK, many countries in EU, as well as what's starting to happen to America with the amount of migrants we've had the last 4 years, where there is an idea of trying to water down the culture of the West?
Yeah, I don't think you need to look for a conspiracy to explain this. The reason for it is fairly straightforward, but it requires understanding the concept of postmodernism. All ruling elites in every society have had a belief system, and you need to have a belief system to establish authority and legitimacy. The belief system that America was founded on was the belief system based on natural rights, John Locke. What's happened in the West is that we've moved away from traditional belief systems based on Judeo-Christian values and natural rights to what you might call the postmodern belief system. Postmodernism is an ideology that maintains that everything is basically a power struggle, and that everything that happens should be seen as a power struggle between different sectional interests. And they've taken the old Marxist concept of the world being divided by class into a world divided by race and gender and all the rest of it. And this postmodern ideology maintains that all cultures are of equal worth and that people are interchangeable. It's postmodernism and the growth of postmodern ideology amongst the American and European intelligentsia that explains this contempt for the nation state and this, lack of respect for American culture and American values. But I think what's interesting about America is that ordinary Americans still buy into the American idea, which is why on a Friday night, when you go to Friday Night Lights in Mississippi or where I come from or across America, people still stand for the national anthem. They still believe in America. The elites don't, but ordinary people do. So I don't think you need to look for a conspiracy to explain why our elite political system is detached from the values of the population. They spent too much time at elite, but actually rather bad universities, learning a whole bunch of garbage from French postmodern ideologues. And that is the root cause of this. It's not a conspiracy.
Yeah, I can see how watering down and starting with kids who go to school to gaslight and confuse the hell out of them, to have a certain level of hate.
To demoralize.
And, I remember I had a guy on the podcast. He wasn't too happy with me. What was his name, Rob? The former Jefferson grandson or something like that, who was on the podcast, and he was not happy with his great-grandfather. I'll never forget when we did this interview. I'm like, what do you think about Thomas Jefferson? Rob, that's the one right there. If you can just pull up that, Lucian Truscott is right on the podcast. And he was just not happy about his great-great-grandfather. Rob, can you go to the interview on how it ends? It's very entertaining how it ends. He forgot to turn off the camera, and I think the audience will get some fun with this one here. It's right there. If you notice the spike, let it play. Yeah, let it play, and it's got to go to the end when, keep letting it play and see if...
Place it. Why not just put it elsewhere and recognize...
Well, I told you. I answered that question.
There you go. So I answered your question as well.
Go a little bit...
I got to tell you.
Watch this.
Yeah.
Go back a little bit, Rob. This is a lot of fun.
One of my favorite interviews of all time.
Yeah.
I wish you nothing but the best.
Okay.
He gave me a love letter at the end.
Take care of yourself.
Watch this compliment at the end.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Watch this.
What a fucking asshole.
You know what this is? This is all the notes I prepared.
So, you know what his story is? Rob, can you pull up his name? Pull up his name on YouTube, on Google, and then go to news. Go to news. Okay, zoom in. So type in his name and then type in Jefferson. Type in Jefferson. And I'm a direct descendant of Thomas Jefferson. Take down his memorial. Okay?
The vanity of it. The vanity of thinking that you in 2024 have a greater wisdom than someone who actually created your country in the first place. Extraordinary. I mean, bad history tells you more about the prejudices of people talking about it today than what happened in the past. This is just bad history.
Yeah, it's disappointing as well. Like for you to have the audacity to think your life is harder than what Jefferson had to do back in the days when they escaped and they fought what they fought. Who are you to think your life is harder than this guy?
It's extraordinary. I mean, I feel so strongly about this. When I moved to America with my daughter, I was alarmed that she was picking up this sort of nonsense from, TikTok and social media, that she would get the wrong idea about America, that she would listen to people who said, the only significant thing about the founding fathers is they owned slaves and that America was a republic founded by slave owners built on stolen land. I was so terrified that she would get this idea, this wrong idea of America, that I made a point of telling her what I regard as sort of the 6 key things that every American should know about their country. And on long car journeys, I used to tell her stories about it. And I ended up actually writing a children's book about it because I thought that I wanted to show her what her new country was like. I wanted her to understand, for example, that America was founded on a radical idea, the idea that all people are created equal, and that this is an exceptional idea. You've had lots of countries founded by defeating other armies, and America certainly did that. It beat the Brits, beat us lot. But America is more than just about Bunker Hill and Saratoga. It was about this idea, a revolutionary idea. I wanted her to know that America's got the best system of government in the world. And it didn't just come about by accident. It came about because the Americans borrowed from the Roman tradition and merged it with the English tradition. This is why, incidentally, they've got a Senate and a Capitol on the banks of the Potomac.
You're talking about Cicero.
Yeah, they borrowed the ideas from the Romans. I mean, extraordinary. I wanted to know that America's been a force for good in the world. I don't want her growing up believing all this nonsense on social media that America's always the bad guy. It's really important that Americans understand this, because otherwise you get morons telling you that you should be ashamed of America and America's founding. And it's the complete opposite. The whole point about America and the Civil War and defeating slavery is that America fought a war to eliminate slavery. America fought a war to eliminate a practice that had existed from time immemorial. America shouldn't be ashamed of America's past.
Yeah, you and I can afford to send our kids to private school. I don't know if your kids go to private school or not. Okay, so they go to private school. This morning, a guy sends me this video. And if you listen to this lady speak, I hope I have this video to send it to you. This is it, Rob. So I'm listening to this lady this morning, and I'm feeling so bad for her, because how many people in America can afford to send their kids to private school? Rob, while you're finding this clip that I just texted you, I'm going to pull up the stat. How many kids in America go to private school? I think 7%, 7 or 8%. Is it really 7%? Okay. I believe. Okay, 11.2 million students were enrolled in private schools in the U.S., okay? So if the number is, say, 7%, that's not a big number.
I think it's 7%. Let's just check that.
Here it says 10%. Pew Research, okay. About 10%, okay? So about 10%. 90% are going to public school, okay?
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't mean they choose to do that. They don't have a choice, okay? So they're sending you to public school. And I watch this video. Watch this video here and look how this mother, you can feel her pain. And she doesn't speak good English, but she speaks good English, but she has an accent. Just listen to what she says. Go ahead, Rob.
She was the girly girl in the house. She used to dress up as a princess. She loved to dance, sing, and she was very artistic. When she was 13, she's starting to go into social media. I noticed that she was sort of depressed because she's starting to herself, and I seek for help. The first year in high school, freshman year, she met this other girl who was going into transgender. She was the one who was telling her that she was depressed because maybe she was not a girl. She was invited to go to an LGBTQ group at school. I didn't know about it. She asked everybody in the family to call her Jay. So I did. Jay, okay, we called you Jay. If you're happy, we call her Jay. She was not happy. And then she came up with Andrew. And that's when DCFS was involved. Because I didn't support all the changes that she was telling everybody, that she was transgender, and she was in the process of it. When TCFS was involved, the school psychology wrote a note saying that my daughter was better off out of my home because we were not supportive towards the change. Yale.
By the way, the Department of Children and Families, right? This kid's going to a public school. The average family can't afford this. So, question for you. You moved to Mississippi from UK. Talk about the average family. How does the average family fight the manipulation and the gaslighting that many of our current educational system public is trying to do to their kids?
Even in a notionally conservative state like Mississippi, where people vote overwhelmingly conservative, you get this agenda being pushed. You get bureaucrats in the Department of Education not only pushing the wrong values on families, but teaching the wrong version of America's history. I think you need to recognize there's only one way, Patrick, of dealing with this.
How's that?
You've got to give every family in America the choices that today only rich people have. And there's a very simple way of doing this. At the moment, it costs people in Mississippi, through their taxes, about $12,000 a year to educate every child. Why not give mum and dad control of that money? Why not allow school choice?
They're not going to do that.
So, they're doing it in Florida.
I know they are. I mean, that's certain states, but
they're doing it in 12 states now. Why not do it in every state in America?
Okay, out of those 12 states, how many of them are red states?
Most.
Okay, that's the problem. So a lot of people are living in blue states, right? So you got California, you got New York, you got Illinois.
Well, hold on a second. Parts of Florida used to be blue. Once you give people school choice and once ordinary people, particularly people on low incomes, understand that school choice means that they get $10,000, $12,000 a year, taxpayer money that they can spend on a school of their choice, you make a lot of blue parts of America go red pretty quickly. One of the reasons why I would say DeSantis has been so successful in Florida and has such a huge majority support is because of school choice. It's created a new conservative coalition.
We came here for him.
A lot of first generation Floridians are solidly behind conservatives now.
Oh, we came here because of his policies. Yeah. We liked it. I lived in Texas 5 years, 24 years in LA, minus my time in the military. So I like his policies, but talk to the families that are living in a state, California, 30 million people live in that state, right? They say we're the 5th largest economy in the world, 6th largest economy in the world. New York, Illinois. What do I do? So one is, all right, make sure you vote for somebody that can change his policies. Fine. What if that doesn't happen? My kid is 10 years old. 8 years policy change is not going to happen. What do I do the next 8 years?
A lot of people, you know this, are doing the one thing you're free to do, which is to move. There's a huge migration of people out of California and New York to southern states. One of the reasons I chose to come to Mississippi is because I think you've seen this southern success story. That we all know that 150 years ago, the American Republic was saved by the North. It's the southern U.S. that's now going to save America because the southern U.S. has got low taxes, limited government, school choice growing, and that has become a model that other states around the country will eventually have to follow. America's 50 different states, a laboratory of experiments. The southern experiment, and particularly the experiment in southern states with school choice, cannot be ignored. Eventually, other states are going to have to follow. We're not there yet. Mississippi doesn't yet have school choice, although we're now surrounded on 3 sides by states that have school choice. Texas famously doesn't yet have school choice, although my good friend Corey DeAngelis is going to make sure that happens. School choice is coming to the South. Every family in the southern U.S. will soon be allowed to control their share of public tax dollars. Once that happens in the South, the pressure to do it in other parts of America is going to become unstoppable.
I just pulled up right now Mississippi, Rob. I'm going to pull up this article by Forbes to you to pull up. I typed in richest cities in Mississippi, okay? And this Forbes article comes up at the top, okay? Richest, yeah, okay. So
I would say Madison's probably number 1.
So if you look at the richest in Mississippi, the latest, okay.
Oxford number 2.
So if you zoom in a little bit and read the first paragraph, yeah, Mississippi unfortunately is perennially ranked. You guys can say it. I'll skip that one as one of, if not the poorest states in U.S. Okay. As of the latest data, the Census Bureau 2021 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, the median household income in the state of Mississippi was $49K, the lowest of the U.S. state, but that doesn't mean there aren't wealthy places in Mississippi. In a series of studies, we analyzed and identified 50 or so. So is it Mississippi's the poorest state in America?
It is, but I should point out, in 2023, the average income in Mississippi overtook for the first time in history the average income of the United Kingdom. So Mississippi may be America's poorest. It's now richer than the mother country.
So you're simply looking at something to compete against UK. That's how you're processing it.
Yeah. Well,
poverty rate
Mississippi is the poorest state, but the whole South used to be poor, and it's not that way anymore. There's been this incredible Southern success story. Look at the growth in Texas. Compare Atlanta today to Atlanta 30 years ago. Tennessee.
Night and day.
Nashville used to be famous just for music. Today, Nashville's where young people want to go to.
Right.
The reason why the South is growing is because it's got low taxes and limited government, maximum economic freedom. It's why Elon Musk moves from California to Texas.
Yeah.
I think he literally just closed the office of Twitter.
And did you see what he put up there? The lights at the top of his
building? Great sign. I don't know what those 3 letters meant, but I could guess.
GFY.
What does that mean?
Have you seen that, Rob? When he left X, he put the lights all the way at the top of the building.
Go find yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Right there.
That symbolizes what's going on, Patrick.
Maybe it's good for you.
People are moving to the South because of their success.
Maybe it's good for you. You know, who knows? I mean, some people may say it's go F yourself, but maybe it's just been like very positive, like good for you guys. You know, we're out of here. You guys do your thing. But no, Mississippi, interesting. Out of all the places, I remember 20 years ago, I had an agent of mine. His name was Marco Gallegos. He probably thought I forgot about him. This is 03. And I said, so Marco, how are things? He says, yeah, I'm taking my family. We're moving to Idaho. I said, Idaho? He says, yeah. So why Idaho? He says, I have a daughter. I got to make sure it's safe for her to go. So I'm going to go over there. I'm like, man, good for you, buddy. I'm sitting there by myself. I'm like, why would anybody go to Idaho? And then you start studying statistics. I think Idaho is like an open carry state. And Idaho, crime is the lowest. It's one of the states that's the lowest in America.
A small town.
Well, that's what happens. So you're protected. You feel safe. You don't have any kind of crime. And if you're somebody that's thinking about the safety of your kids, your family, your decision-making process can be slightly different.
We had a video on earlier showing about a teenager who had clear confusion.
Sure.
One of the things I notice about the southern U.S., it's not just Mississippi, but across the southern U.S., girls are uncomplicatedly feminine. And I'm the father of a teenage daughter.
Yeah.
I noticed this. Girls are uncomplicatedly feminine. Boys are uncomplicatedly masculine. There's none of this forced androgyny that creates, I think, so much unhappiness amongst teenagers. And I think that's hugely important. As a parent, there's nowhere I'd rather raise a teenager than in the South.
Well, I feel good where I'm at right now. I got 2 boys and 2 girls. And I used to live in California. It was a little bit weird. We lived in Texas. You know what's weird about Texas? If in Texas, you know, we have 4 kids, a couple of them are all vaccinated, a couple of them are not. Okay, it's kind of like 50-50. And in Texas, our kids went to a Christian school. And my wife one day says, babe, I went to see if our kids have to have the vaccine cards and take all the vaccines. And even though we're going to private school, they said, no, you have to take it. Like, what are you talking about, babe? We're in Texas. No way. She said, no, I'm telling you. So let me text Bobby Kennedy, RFK. 11:30 at night, I text Bobby. I'm like, hey, Bobby, here's what my wife is telling me. Is this true? 30 seconds, he calls me. He doesn't even hesitate. And I'm like, hey, he's like, don't do anything. Let me get somebody on the call. He gets somebody on the call. We stay on the phone for 1 hour for him to try to figure out. Texas is not a, where you can go out there and say for religious, reasons, you don't need to take them. But you know what Florida is? You go to the doctor and say, no. Here's for religious reasons, we're not doing this.
Ditto Mississippi. In fact, I think we copied Florida.
How many other states have that, by the way?
I can't remember. I mean, there were at least half a dozen.
What is it called, Rob? There's a word for it.
Religious
exemption. That's what it is. Religious exemption.
I think there were like 6 or 7 states, and they were all basically southern, I think.
Exemption. Yeah, but I remember Texas wasn't one of those. I thought for sure Texas would have been one of them, but it wasn't. Okay, so no.
It's 13 states, okay.
Which one are those, Rob? Can you see which one it is? Mississippi's one of them. Yeah,
Mississippi.
Right there. Mississippi's one of them.
And Mississippi Center for Public Policy, who I work for, was pushing for that. Good
to have that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We believe in freedom.
You're happy.
I personally took the vaccine, and I would want my family to take the vaccine. But if you don't want to, you shouldn't have to.
See, that's the thing. That's my philosophy.
Yeah. Live and let live.
My dad took every one of them. My nanny took. My dad's the most conservative person in our house. He took all of them. My nanny took all of them. A lot of our relatives took all of them. But I was running an insurance company. I said, listen, guys, you guys make a decision. You want to take it, take it. You don't want to take it, you don't want to take it. We like the fact that Florida let us make that decision ourselves.
If you want people to behave responsibly, give them responsibility, treat them as adults.
That's right. I got to tell you, I don't know where this conversation was going to go today. And I thought, how different will this be than Douglas Murray?
We haven't even touched on Brexit yet.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about it. By the way, if you want to go there and kind of tell us how it's, because, okay, let me give you some stats and some pushback, and you tell me your, so here's some data for you, okay? Brexit effects on the UK. Ready? Brexit's effect on UK has caused former members of the parliament to move to Mississippi. Okay, I'm just kidding. I just made that one up right there. I just thought it was appropriate.
Some people would say that was a Brexit bonus.
So economic impact. The UK's economy continues to adapt post-Brexit. As of 2023, the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, maintains that Brexit will reduce UK's GDP by 4% in the long term compared to remaining in the EU. In 2022, UK exports to the EU partially recovered but remained 10% lower than 2019 levels, while imports from EU were still down 15%. I'll read the next one. Trade relations. Trade with EU accounted for 42% of UK's exports and 50% of imports in 2022. The additional administrative burdens continue to cost UK businesses an estimated $7.5 billion annually due to custom checks and paperwork. Immigration policy. Net EU migration saw a shift in 2022. Net migration reached 504,000, a record high, but this was driven largely by non-EU migrants. Net migration from the EU remained low, contributing to labor shortages in sectors like hospitality and agriculture. Okay. So I'll pause right there. What has been a net positive and net negative ever since Brexit took place?
Britain formally left in 2020.
Right.
Now, you'll remember that shortly after that, there was this global event that happened called COVID lockdowns.
Yes.
This makes it really quite difficult to look at the impact simply because we literally shut down about 25% of output. COVID was very disruptive to supply chains. How much of the changes to supply chains are caused by the COVID lockdowns? How much by Brexit? I think as we start to move away from the COVID lockdowns, we get a fairer picture. And I think the picture is something like this. Leaving the European Union means that Britain has been able to increase exports. British exports are higher now than ever. British exports to Europe are higher now than ever. Europe has not done terribly well since 2016 when Britain voted to leave the EU. But Britain has been amongst the fastest European economies since leaving the European Union. But that's not really saying much. But when people say that Brexit has harmed Britain, well, it seems to have done. If you're comparing growth rates, we've outperformed most European countries. But all that said, I still think we haven't taken full advantage of it. When the United States became independent, you beat the Brits at Yorktown, right? You very wisely got a whole bunch of really clever people. You put them in a courthouse in Philadelphia, and you got them to come up with a system of self-government, the Constitution, and it worked wonderfully. Imagine if instead of doing that, the Americans had put that Chancellor Aaron Burr in charge. That's what Britain has basically done. Since voting to leave the European Union, we put a bunch of chancellors and losers in charge of the country. We've had a series of disastrous prime ministers from both parties, and I think this is a real problem. Britain hasn't taken full advantage of Brexit. When I was campaigning for Britain to leave the European Union, we very consciously wanted Britain to reduce regulation. Being in Europe means you're heavily regulated. We've not repealed the regulations on the development of new medicines. We've not removed many of the regulations on the use of data on the internet online. Now, to be fair, Britain hasn't adopted a lot of the new European regulations, which is one of the reasons, for example, why Facebook recently announced that they would be testing AI in Britain, not in Europe. But Britain hasn't taken full advantage of leaving the European Union. Once you reclaim self-government, you've got to figure out how to govern yourself. Britain hasn't yet done that. We've still had a succession of disastrous governments. But that doesn't mean Brexit's a bad thing. Brexit, I think, needs a transformation in the way that.
Let me ask you a question. Do you know sometimes when you leave a company, like when I left the company and I started my own company, there was a unified desire to see me fail miserably, because if I failed, others wouldn't be inspired to replicate what I did, right? So lawsuits, losing contracts, defamation of character, that lasted about 7 years, and it was nasty. Doing whatever they can to deplete my savings constantly. Now, eventually, we succeeded, we overcame, and we sold the company for a few $100 million. It was a beautiful exit. You know, it was fantastic. And now it's one of the biggest companies in the insurance industry nationwide, okay? And it's been fantastic. However, you guys leave. There's a lot of people that can't let you win.
Of course.
There's a lot of people that have to do whatever they can to show data and statistics and send the wrong type of migrants to your country to see a massive fall taking place. How much of what's happened to UK the last 4 years do you think is some of the puppet masters behind closed doors driving certain types of people to your country to have it lose its sizzle, to say, see what happens when you, how much of it you think is happening?
You're very accurate when you put your finger on it. The European elite want to punish Britain. Britain cannot be allowed to be a success or seen to be a success by the populations that remain in the EU, because if that happens, the Scandinavians, the Hungarians, they're going to want this, the Poles, they're going to want the same thing. They're going to want to break away from. You're
flirting with conspiracy here. Don't flirt with conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy.
I don't want you to do that.
They say it on television. I mean, there was a man called Michel Barnier, who was the chief negotiator. And he basically said that we're going to negotiate a trade relationship with Britain that will punish Britain, even if it harms us in Europe. So, I mean, it's not.
I believe that.
They've said this out loud. But, you know, if you mustn't just blame European governments. A lot of the failure was the British Prime Minister, called Theresa May, immediately after Brexit. She came in and she made these extraordinary concessions unnecessarily. She was a believer in Britain staying in the European Union. Why on earth they allowed her to be Prime Minister in charge of negotiating with Europe, even though she didn't believe in Brexit, I do not know. But she managed to negotiate a whole series of agreements that have basically given us a suboptimal Brexit. But, you know, it can be fixed, and I think it will be fixed.
Liz Truss, do you remember Liz Truss's whole text, it's done, you know, and with Blinken, that whole exchange that happened during the Nord Stream pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. One, what's your opinion on Liz Truss, and what's your opinion on that story?
I've known Liz for 20 years. She's a great person, but I think she was out of her depth. I don't think she was suited to be Prime Minister. I agree with her on many things, but the ideas were great. The execution and implementation were terrible. I'm not sure what you meant by the Nord Stream. Was this
oh, you don't remember the story?
Vaguely.
So where, Rob, if you can, I don't know if you remember when the whole thing, everybody was talking about this, where there was claims, Russian Foreign Minister spokesman urged that the former UK Prime Minister to explain her message allegedly sent to U.S. Secretary of State right after the accident on Nord Stream gas pipeline at Baltic Sea. Honestly, I don't care who and how got this information. I'm interested in London's response to the following question. Did Britain's Prime Minister Liz Truss send a message to U.S. Secretary of Anthony Blinken right after the explosion at Nord Stream gas pipeline with the words, "It's done"? Do you remember this on Telegram or no?
No.
You don't remember any of this?
No.
Okay.
I'm not on Telegram.
Well, this was a big story at the time that everybody was talking about when this took place, and there was a lot of controversy behind it when it happened. But if you don't know anything about it.
But I mean, no conspiracy theorist, no disrespect, but no serious conspiracy is going to involve someone who managed to remain Prime Minister for a mere 40 days. I mean, you know.
No, but it's just weird for her to send a message to somebody on Telegram saying it's done. Blinken or something. Yeah, that's the only thing. The timing of it was.
How do we know that she said that?
Rob, can you pull up what the exchange was with this?
And how do we know she wasn't talking about, I don't know.
No, we don't know that. No,
ordering
that's none of us know that. I'm just asking you to see what your opinion was. I don't even think in my opinion, who was behind the Nord Stream, it's done, was a complete different story. My opinion is a completely different place. I just thought you have a relationship with Liz if you knew anything about the story.
Yeah, I mean, I know Liz and she's a nice person, but the idea that she would be capable of remaining in office for more than 2 months is absurd. The idea you would therefore involve her.
Why do you think she was only in office for 2 months?
I don't think she was up to it.
You don't think she was up to it?
Yeah. I mean, being in
How does she
job,
get nominated? How does she become one?
a member of parliament or a minister?
No, minister.
I think in Britain you've had a lot of you've got a political system in Britain that basically filters out people who have competence and character. It rewards people who are obsequious and suck up to the boss. And I think this means that you end up with people who hide their beliefs until they get to the top, but at no stage have ever actually learned how to implement them, which is why you end up with politicians who sometimes say things that you agree with, but never actually seem to make them happen. It's not just something that happens in Britain. I think you see some of this in America. People vote conservative, but don't seem to get administrators that tackle the bureaucrats who impose the woke agenda in their children's classroom. Why not? Well, because they're not good at...
Who would she be a comparable in the States?
Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle.
Look the part, act the part. Don't put him anywhere near power.
Wow. So you obviously think very highly of her when it comes onto politics. Very respectful right there. Any final thoughts you want to tell us before we wrap this up today? Because I've enjoyed talking to you so far.
It's been really great. Thank you for having me. It is a great honor and a privilege to be in America, and I think this is one of the highlights of my time here, so thank you.
And I appreciate you flying out all the way from a city in UK called Mississippi, which is a state here. But,
I think it is the greatest state in the union, but we may disagree on that.
I love that. Let me tell you, I love that you believe Mississippi is the greatest state in the union. I freaking love it. And, and I think there's the argument. But by the way, a lot of people like right now.
Have you been to Mississippi?
I've been. I was in the Army, so I traveled all over. I've been to 40-something states, so and one time I lived in an RV for 30 days. I went from LA to Miami, all the way up to Toronto, to San Francisco, back in LA. Lived in an RV for 30 days.
But if you've only ever seen, if you've only ever seen Mississippi when you were being drilled in the Army and when you were in an RV, you may not have seen the full glory of...
So you're saying the nightlife in Mississippi is legit?
Friday Night Lights, it is awesome.
No, but hear me out. My point is, for a person that's thinking about building a family and you want to go raise your family where you feel safe, you're going to have to consider places like Mississippi. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not making fun of it. All I'm saying is you're going to have to, and by the way, whether it's the South, whether it's certain states that are conservative values where you can feel comfortable raising your kids, the stories of some people that moved in certain areas, they're like, why would you come here? You have no idea how safe I feel raising my family here. Great, I respect it. And Idaho is one of them. But anyways, appreciate you for coming out.
Thank you so
fantastic.
Much. Appreciate it, Patrick.
Is there anywhere you want, if people want to go find you and follow up with you, is there anywhere you want them to go to?
Absolutely. If you're interested in the book for children that I was talking about American values, Google search meganandmiles.com. That's meganandmiles.com. Google search it. If you want to connect with me, I'm on Twitter @DouglasCarswell, @DouglasCarswell. And I'd love to hear from you.
We're going to put both of the links below, Rob, and people can go find you there. Take care, everybody. God bless. Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. I'm Douglas Carswell. You can join me on Minect, where you can ask me any question you want. Why I believe in American exceptionalism. What made me leave Brexit Britain and come to Mississippi, the greatest state, I think, in America. You can ask me any question you want, and I'll answer it directly. Look forward to hearing from you.